Welcome. The deep state has its hands in everything, and I was in the middle of it for decades. When I blew the whistle on the CIA's torture program, the deep state turned on me. It ruined my life, took away my rights, threw me in prison, but they didn't break me. I fought back, and I still do. I'm John Kiriakou. On my show, The Deep State, I take you behind the geopolitical moves, the color revolutions, behind the politics and the politicians. We shine a light on where the deep state is hiding. I want to bring on now Natalie and Clayton Morris, hosts of the hit YouTube show Redacted. Turning to Tucker Carlson. You were on Tucker Carlson just a few days ago, Clayton. I've been on a couple of times. I think I'm going to go back on in the next 4 or 5 weeks. I like Tucker very much. I consider him to be a friend. And I have to tell you, I'm genuinely worried for his safety. Tucker is one of those rare truth tellers. He speaks whatever happens to be on his mind, but it's always very well thought out. He's not afraid to call important people on the carpet for things that they've said or done. In the current political climate, in the let's call it the post-Charlie Kirk era, do you think Tucker Carlson has reason to be worried?
I think he wouldn't admit that. He doesn't like to, he never likes to have the focus be on him at all.
That's right.
I've known him for years, and he's never like me, like
Never.
navel gazing. He hates that. He hates that with a passion, I need a large security contingent because I'm so important. Like, he's not that kind of person at all. But look, the SBU tried to kill him, almost blew up his car when he went to Moscow. Like there's some realities here. You have these nut job, MAGA influencers, these sort of pro-Israel Zionists who are basically actively calling for him to be arrested, attacked. And they have platforms. I mean, they're literally not thrown off of X. They're calling for like the arrest and hurting of his family, and they're still somehow on X, and they still have jobs at like Fox News somehow. Like, when I worked at Fox News, if I would have called for like the death of a human being, like, I would have been fired. But this is a new era, so you can call for attacks on certain people like that. So yeah, and I think he's doing what he needs to do to protect himself, and I'm sure he's got a wife. His wife is probably wanting to make sure he's safe and protected, and he's got people around him who are saying, "Hey, Tucker, I know you don't like this to be about yourself, but we're going to protect you." So, but I don't want to speak out of turn for what's going on behind the scenes. But yeah, he is a truth teller, and of course that's a small that's a commodity these days. It's hard to find those.
Why is it that there are so few people, whether they're on the political left or the political right in the United States, who are unwilling to tell the truth about the situation on the ground in Israel and Palestine? And more specifically, what I mean is that Tucker had, for example, Mother Agapia, George Stephanopoulos' sister, who's a Greek Orthodox nun. She has lived in the West Bank or in East Jerusalem for decades. And she had a very long conversation with Tucker about what life is like for Christians in Israel. It's extremely difficult. Tucker then went to Israel and interviewed Ambassador Mike Huckabee. In my estimation, that interview was a disaster, an unmitigated disaster for Huckabee. He was unable to answer Tucker's questions. And when he did answer Tucker's questions, he essentially turned the entire Middle East against the United States, saying that God promised Israel to the Jews. Israel means everything from the Euphrates River to the Nile, which is essentially the entire Middle East, and they can go ahead and take it, he said. He didn't care. So first of all, how much damage do you think that does? But secondly, and I want to ask both of you your opinions, but secondly, why is this the prevailing position among American Christians when it was Palestinian Christians who were the original Christians and they get no love from American Christians.
Yeah, this is something that I've been pretty obsessed with in the last 2 years because I was inspired by the rise of Christianity, the popularity of Christianity around the Trump election, because it seemed like there were some conservative values that were revalidated in the election of Donald Trump. And I thought what that meant was sort of family values, sort of, I don't know, a refutation of some of the sexual perversions that was so popular during the Biden years. And then for this group to turn around and support a genocide and support a terrorist government, I was confused by. And so I went back to where this began. I recently finished the Canfield book called Schofield and His Amazing Book, or something like that. It's a tough read, but it tells the story of the Schofield Bible, which is the informant text of evangelicals. And I thought, why? Why did they do this? Where did it come from? It turns out that Cyrus Schofield himself was a bit of a scoundrel. He was a Confederate war soldier. He was the district attorney in Kansas. He had lied about his Confederate service to the Army. He defected from there as well. He says he's from Tennessee. He's not. He's from Michigan. He had 2 daughters and a Catholic wife who he left penniless, even though he became quite rich. And then before he did that, he was sued several times for fraud. He just was a scoundrel, and then all of a sudden Christian conversion, and he's a star, a rising star in the Christian movement. This is around early 1900s. He moves to Massachusetts. He becomes a part of this Niagara Falls Convention. And in the late 1800s, there was this appetite for end of the world theology because the world was hard back then. And he joins this movement and somehow becomes a member of the Lotos Club in New York City. The Lotos Club is a club of Wall Street bankers and early Zionists. They're the ones who fund the Schofield Bible. They see in him the snake oil salesman they need. They fund this movement. And then this guy who'd been a scoundrel his whole life, is now this popular theologian, a popular priest, a religious leader who never had, and all of a sudden this book is just everywhere. Why? How did that happen? Well, do evangelicals know that it's Wall Street backed, that it was the brainchild of Wall Street and early Zionists? I don't think they do. And so their allegiance to this comes from a pretty rotten place, and I don't think they know it.
Well, there are evangelicals that we know that have broken free of this and had educated themselves on this. And that's why they want to suppress this story, because if more evangelicals learn about this, if you go to Texas, for instance, and to go to any of those churches and you were to educate them on this, they would cast you out. So they don't want you to know that this entire line of Christianity has been co-opted by like a scoundrel and
Schofield's original churches were in Dallas, so that was born of that movement, and then it just grew. It was Texas and then the Northeast.
But we have friends who've broken out of this, educated themselves, and once they realize that this whole their whole movement is a canard in many ways, backed by this scoundrel and this fake version of the Bible in many ways, backed by Wall Street Zionists, they're outraged by it, and they become non-denominational.
Right.
They're kind of wandering around the desert looking for a new church because they can't believe that their whole 20, 30 years of being raised in that environment was a lie.
It was a lie.
Ways.
Years I was an adjunct professor of intelligence studies at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, which is the largest evangelical university in the world. And when they first approached me with this job offer, I said, "Are you sure you want me? You and I probably disagree on 95% of the issues. Why would you want me to be a professor?" And without missing a beat, the dean of the Jesse Helms School of Government said, "Because torture's not Christian." And I said, "You know what? I'll take the job." And so I really, really enjoyed my time at Liberty. But we clashed constantly over this issue of Middle Eastern Christians. I would take them to task every single time I would hear them say something about sending a delegation to convert people to Christianity in Palestine. And I said, this is where Christianity began. You guys are snuffing out Palestinian Christians. There was one student that I had who told me that she was going on a mission. And I said, oh, that's great. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to bring people to Christ. I said, cool, where are you going? And she said, Macedonia. I said, but they're already Christians in Macedonia. They're Orthodox, like me.
Well, look at Iran. What's the plan for Iran?
But they don't consider it
They
their
don't.
type of Christian.
No,
it's almost as if they're
don't.
savage type. Like, yes, but we really understand it and they don't. And so we are going to, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but let me just finish this point. Their theology is fundamentally conflicting.
Yes.
Because evangelicals want eventually for all the Jews that they support to convert to Christianity.
And
the
that's the
Jews
bottom
absolutely do not want that.
No.
They want this war to bring about the coming of their Messiah, and they will remain Jews. So they have two very different end goals. They're just kind of, merged right now on the war and what it will affect. And it's like, let's not talk about what happens after the rapture. I think you're coming to me. You think you're going to you. We'll just run along. Let's just have our little war.
The rapture being a late 19th century American evangelical invention, by the way.
Yes. Yes, again, coming out of this Niagara Falls, if you study the late 1800 movement, and, out of that was born Jehovah's Witnesses, which I was raised one, and yes, and evangelicals, and this like end of times type theology, which I don't think you understand how much power that hands the government. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the savages thing is really important. Like this idea that if you're at a Dallas like mega church, that you're somehow more civilized than these Christians who've grown up in the Holy Land. Also, what's going to happen to the nearly 1 million Christians that live in Iran?
That's right.
Are we in any way discerning when we're carpet bombing Tehran how many of those we're killing, and how many Christian churches are throughout Iran? By the way, I mean I don't know the number. Maybe you have a better number on it, but there are many. And nearly, I think, 1 million Christians that live in Iran.
And many of
I'm
the
sure
churches,
we'll prioritize them.
Many of the churches go back more than 1,000 years.
Right.
There's a long history
Right.
of Christianity in Iran that's just ignored. It's just ignored today. Well,
I'm just so struck. We're not allowed to talk about the Christians being killed in Syria. We're not allowed to talk about the Christians being killed in Gaza. For some reason, if you bring it up, then you're an anti-Semite, which I just can't wrap my head around that reasoning. Like we're not allowed to talk about your carpet bombing of Gaza is killing a lot of Christians or displacing a lot of Christians, or what's happening in Syria. We can't talk about that. The beheading of Christians. We can't. You're an anti-Semite if you bring that up, and it's infuriating.
I have to tell you a little story, and it's apropos of Syria and the situation in Syria, but it's